us, Chris Blakeslee, and he will be doing a Q&A with none other than Bruce from Printavo. Yesterday, so forever, Bruce's name has been in my phone as Bruce from Printavo. And yesterday, Siri did one of those like suggestions, like new contact, and it changed his name to Bruce Ackerman in my phone. So I'll never be able to find him again. But anyways, come to the stage, guys, and formulate some questions for these guys, because they've got some really good insight into the industry, supply chain, and life in general. Thanks.
What's happening, everybody?
All right.
All right.
It's gonna be great. Luke, I want to give a little bit more Q&A. Let me know in like 10 minutes. I've bugged you with so many questions every time we run into the trade show, because I'm just asking, how do you think about this? What do you think about that? So
Let's do it.
I've got a ton here for today. But of course, first of all, thank you so much for spending time with all of us.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, you're super busy, you know, running Bella Canvas, running Allo Yoga. These are not small brands. First, I took some time and I went through as much as I could find online about you, which isn't a ton. But you have an unbelievably stacked resume. I'm just going to go ahead and read this, okay? John Hopkins finance grad, John Hopkins MBA, Wharton School of Business, multinational corporate finance, Harvard Law School, strategic negotiations.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of all that, I was like, why is he hanging out with a bunch of screen printers? But I mean, tell us like how you got here.
Well, first of all, most of the people that I went to school with wouldn't be able to be entrepreneurs, so that's a pretty cool part of it. But my connection to the industry was sort of a weird turn of events. I had some colleague friends who were in private equity, and I didn't know anything about this industry, absolutely zero. Before I was in the industry, which I came in 2007, I was in heavy, complex industrial construction, like as far from this as you could get. And but I had some friends in private equity, and at the time, Alpha Broder, which was the company that I joined in the industry, they were owned by Bain Capital, private equity firm. So I got introduced to that group of people, and I went, and I didn't know anything about the business, but I connected with the leadership team there. I liked the team members on that leadership team, and it was just a perfect time to do something a little bit different. I liked kind of the idea of the industry. I mean, I didn't know the industry existed, but I had gotten stuff from the industry, just like everybody else in the world. And but the connection with that group and just wanting to sort of be in a more entrepreneurial environment, that was the thing that brought me in. So 2007, I went there, and I left for a little while. So I left in 13, came back to Bella Canvas in 17. And I had worked really closely with Bella Canvas the whole time that I was at Alpha Broder. In fact, we had 6 amazing years together as partners. And I always said to myself, if an opportunity presented to go be a part of the Bella Canvas team, I would finish my career with Bella Canvas. And at the time, it didn't, who knew? I didn't know if that would happen or not. But when our co-founders decided to think differently about the structure of the business and growth, and as you mentioned, with Allo as Bella Canvas's sister brand growing as fast as it is, they wanted to create structured leadership teams in both companies. And so when that opportunity presented, it was the easiest decision I've ever made, and I've never looked back.
What was the goal of saying, hey, we need somebody like you to take us from what to what?
You mean within Bella Canvas and Allo? Yeah, I guess our co-founders, Danny and Marco, 2 of the most amazing people. Some in the room have probably seen videos that they've done and other things. They've been best friends since they were in middle school, and they've had lots of businesses together before Bella Canvas, which has been around since the late 90s. Like they had a mistletoe business together. And then they realized it was highly seasonal. And they're like, well, what are we going to do for the rest of the year? And And they were screen printers, in fact. They were the largest screen printer in Northern California for many years.
Really?
And they printed for retail brands like Banana Republic and The Gap, and they had other customers like Fox Racing, if you're familiar with Fox Racing. And those companies at the time were really unhappy with the types of products that were available in the industry, because it was, sort of like very basic, tubular, cheap garments. And they said, look, if you guys can't find something better, we're going to find somebody else. And in the process of sourcing that and finding that is how they created Bella Canvas in its early days. So, fast forward 2010, 2011, Bella Canvas is rapidly growing. I'm working with them at the time at Alpha Broder. We're blowing the business up in the industry. And then Aloe begins. And Aloe, a few years later, caught its trajectory, and it's now a super rapidly growing business. And Danny and Marco are smart guys, and I think they wanted a few things. They wanted structured executive teams that could run the businesses. Mm-hmm. They're still both really involved, and they add incredible value to the company. But I think their preference is to get involved and be necessary where they believe they can add value, but not be essential to the business functioning. And so my role got created so that they had that freedom and flexibility and just more scalability and professionalism in the business.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I want to touch on inventory, as obviously everybody here.
Is there such a thing these days?
Well, I didn't want to slam you on it, but if you could talk about it from your angle and what you see when you deal with on such a multinational scale.
Well, at the moment it is a hyper complex problem because, and I think that brands like Bella Canvas are experiencing sort of, an extra dimension, which is during the pandemic, we had this huge influx of consumers to the decorated apparel segment. And what happened was, if you looked at studies that were done before the pandemic and you asked the general consumer, how do you prefer to buy apparel? Mm-hmm. Like 65% of them prefer to do it in a store because you can touch it, you can get a better sense of what it looks like, you can try it on. So the pandemic comes along and forces all those people in that 65% to go online to shop. And there are a lot of companies in our industry that do a really good job with ad spend online around decorated apparel. And so all of a sudden their target, the population of people to target with those ads grew exponentially. So all these consumers come into the channel, and consumers who don't really know how our industry works, and they don't know about like the version of t-shirts in our industry that you really can't buy at apparel because they're kind of, at the cheapest end of the spectrum. They want a retail quality product. So the brands like Bella Canvas that are in the premium segment, the demand for our product is now off the charts because there's all this new business that's pulling through these online stores. And then simultaneous to that, we made fewer t-shirts in 2020 simply because the pandemic was happening. In our case, we converted to masks. We had operations shut down for a period of time. So you're in this catch-up mode with extra demand. And then you layer the third dimension into it, which is all the issues with global supply chain problems. And it's not by surprise. Anytime you shut something down, if you shut a port down, and now the ships that have to get in and out of that port can't get in and out, and then they don't get to the next port on time. It's just like what happens at an airport. Like if you land, which I do every week in Los Angeles, half the time you land, there's somebody else at your gate, like we've all been through that. It's a gigantic version of the same problem. The only difference is you can't get the boat in and out in 45 minutes to an hour. It could take an entire day. And so that backup around the world and all these ports, and on any given day, we have about 400 containers that are moving somewhere around the world. And so you just get in that log jam and it creates an issue. So it's new demand, which is a wonderful problem to have in the business. It's the catch-up effect of last year, and it's global transit and supply chain issues. But the cool thing is we're making more product than we've ever made before. In fact, on a weekly basis, we're making 40% more product than we made at the peak pre-pandemic. And in the past 6 months, we've bought 2 giant factories in Central America. We're in the midst of building a 500,000 square foot warehouse in Nicaragua. I think most people know from our videos, we own the largest automated cutting facility in the world. It's in Los Angeles. We're building a mirror of that in Montgomery, Alabama. We're just starting that project. So now we'll have the first and second largest in the world, which is kind of like a weird claim to fame, but it's cool. And we just opened a 750,000 square foot warehouse 2 weeks ago in Maryland on the East Coast to better serve customers east of the Mississippi, in addition to the big one we have in California. So like we couldn't handle more operational things to try to get caught up. It's just going to take time. I think it happens, we're back to keeping up with demand and replenishing our own inventory somewhere around like mid-April next year.
And that's when you feel like things for you guys will be relatively normal?
Well, normal maybe is an interesting description. I think we're better than treading water at that point. But if what happens with demand continues to happen, to really get back, because when you think about inventory turns, and I don't know how many in the room have inventory programs you do with your customers, but the amount of inventory you have to carry grows as your business grows, right? In any program. And so as the business is growing more rapidly, we have to replenish more inventory while we're keeping up with that demand. And that could take us through the end of the second quarter into third quarter next year. But I feel like from a service level standpoint, where our inventory, our in-stock rates are back in the mid-90s, 90% range, I think that's mid-April next year. Today we're in the low 70s and still growing 70%, which is unbelievable.
What's like a sense to give everybody of Bell & Canvas's size, like a people thing, or how many garments you're making, things like that?
Yeah.
I understand the scale here.
So we are, I think, to put it like in context of the industry, on revenue and unit volume, we're the second largest brand in the basics business, the t-shirt and sweatshirt business. And Gildan is the largest. I think everybody knows that. So we're the second largest. We will be the largest based upon the growth rate that we have now by probably the third quarter of 2023. So it's not that far away. And to give a sense of production, all these investments that we're making, which will get us, which will be operational by the middle of next year, will give us the ability to produce around 12 million units a week. So 12 million t-shirts and sweatshirts a week. So that'll give you a sense of how big the business is. On people, directly and indirectly, 15,000 people or so that are employed in some way based upon our supply chain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Back when we were running a small screen printing shop in college, American Apparel was like always asked for, right? I mean, people go to the store, then they'd ask for it. Hey, we can have that, can we have that garment? You guys are obviously starting to open your own retail stores too. How do you think that affects your strategy, especially on the Bell & Canvas side? I know that, is it one or are there more stores now? And then what is the thought process behind that?
So there's one store open now, but there will be 3 stores open within the next 4 months. So the flagship store is in Beverly Hills, which is not exactly the perfect demographic for Bell & Canvas, but we had the space because the Aloe store is next door. And so we thought, well, let's try it. Let's kind of figure out the look and the feel of the store, and let's get some customer feedback. But the demographics in Beverly Hills were not exactly our target demographic. The store has blown the doors off. It's been so far beyond expectation. We got a call from our team members there a couple weeks ago that Halle Berry was in the store. And one of the associates said, "Oh, were you next door shopping at Aloe?" She's like, "No, I love Bell & Canvas." And obviously 2 different product categories, but that was cool. There's a lot of neat things happening. Yesterday we had a big event at the store. We did our first collaboration in the store. So like people say, well, do you have aspirations for Bella Canvas to be a big retail brand? And that would be a wonderful outcome. But if you ask Danny and Marco, they would say, well, we already have a fast growing retail brand. So that is not their motivation. The real motivation was in the Bella Canvas store, we sell blank Bella Canvas t-shirts for $25. And if we can get consumers all across the country to think of Bella Canvas t-shirts blank at $25 being a great deal, it gives everybody in this room the ability to raise your price. And that was the reason that we went down that road. We went down the road to create consumer pull-through demand in the channel so that it would lessen margin pressure in the industry. And that's the ultimate measure of success. Bella Canvas is a retail brand in Nordstrom and all the things that we've done. That the goal was to get the consumer to ask for it and be willing to pay more for it so that we could lift channel margins. Because it's kind of crazy, like when you think about, and we could all commiserate about this, and this might enter into the territory of stuff we should talk about over a beer because it's like a little aggravating. But when you think about it, like we make a t-shirt that you can sell for $25 blank and sell it for $3.80 to you guys. And then, you put a bunch of time and effort into it, you turn it into a great t-shirt and you might sell it for $6.50 or $7. And I know there's a lot of variation in that for different reasons. And then the person who buys it from you might sell it for $30. And it's like the margin is at the easiest end of the person who does the least work makes the most gross profit per unit. And that's weird. Like that's not normally the way industries work. And so our mission is sort of like, let's find a way to create enough value all the way down at that end that we can get everybody in the industry to raise prices and make more gross profit per unit. So that's what we're doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm curious, that must be such a new skill, right, for a company that was historically a lot more wholesale too. Now granted, you have the Aloe experience that you could take over, but how do you build that team? Is that hiring? Is that finding somebody from a different industry, to get in, to make a first store successful and then continue to grow?
Well, I think so. It's a combination of things. I mean, we obviously have learned the ropes in retail in Bella Canvas's sister brand, and so you figure things out. But the other cool thing is that we have a team made up of just super, super sharp people who are into brands. Like they're in this business because they love apparel and they love branding and they love the retail experience and like the feeling that you get when you attach to a brand that you really kind of believe in what they believe in and you love the brand's sort of ethos and all that kind of stuff. And so some of our people, many of our people, in fact, I would say maybe even most of our people are like the exact consumer that we want to get to fall in love with Bella Canvas as a brand. And so they're the best to figure it out, and they are figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And so we've been really fortunate in that regard, but it helps to have the experience that we've had over the past couple of years.
With all this growth, 2 different companies, everything going on, how do you manage your day, your week? What does that look like?
Well, I don't know that I actually do. Sometimes I feel like I have a weird schedule. So I actually live an hour north of here, an hour drive time north of here. It's only 20 miles. But which is,
Chicago, yeah.
Chicago, yeah. I live in a place where there's horrible traffic, and I work in a place where there's even more horrible traffic. But so I fly to Los Angeles every Monday morning. So I take the first flight out every Monday, and then I come back either Thursday night or Friday afternoon. And I get asked all the time, mostly by my wife's friends who ask her, how do you put up with this horrific schedule? But it's it has an interesting impact in that when I'm at work, I have the ability to be all in. And then when I'm home, I have the ability to be all in at home. And so what I have spent the past couple of years focusing on with our team is building an executive team in Bella Canvas that is completely self-sufficient, super sharp people like Carissa, who runs our our national sales team, and Tori over in the corner runs our technical design team. So our executive team in Bella Canvas is phenomenal. And Allo has its own executive team as well. And then there were a couple missing pieces, like we grew so rapidly that we kind of forgot we should have a CFO along the way a couple years ago. And then we woke up one day and thought, well, maybe that would be a good idea. And so I kind of just thought back over my career of the companies I worked for and who was the best CFO that I'd ever worked with. And we brought him in. We went after him and brought him in. And then earlier this year, we made a decision that we needed a COO in the business because of all these operational things. And those things were starting to consume so much of my time that I wasn't available to the rest of the team for other important things. And I did the same thing. I thought, well, who's the best COO that I ever worked with? And so we went and we brought that person in. Now they did both happen to come from Alfred Broder, so we sort of like took them out of one of our biggest partners, and they got over all that and we're good. But I think, like the most important thing in business is, and I say this a lot, so it's starting to feel like a little bit of a cliche, there are lots of good people that you can work around, lots of good people. But there is a massive difference between good people and great people. And when you meet great people or you work with them, you can see it instantaneously. And I think most of us, because it is rare, we kind of have this approach of thinking it's just rare. Like you couldn't possibly have your entire leadership team be great people because it just doesn't seem likely. But it is likely. If you put the effort into it, you can do it. You can actually get a team of great people. And so I would say, managing my day, my mission is to make sure that that team has everything they need to do their jobs. And if I do that well, then I make, across the two businesses, 20 people much more effective than they would have been otherwise. If I tried to do it myself, I'm one person, just like all of us. We're one person. You can only do so much. Mm-hmm. And so I would hope that if you asked our teams that question, they would say that I take the role very seriously of empowering them and making sure they have everything they need. Nothing gets in their way. We don't waste time debating good ideas. We do it. If it doesn't work out, fine. We learn from it. We move on. And we've made mistakes. We've made mistakes that have cost us, a couple $1 million. Well, I can think of one. I won't share exactly how we made the mistake, but just like you miss things in business, mm-hmm. and it cost us over $1 million. It was kind of a silly mistake actually, and even when we talked through it with our two co-founders, Danny's reaction was he was like, "Well, that sucks. Let's not do that again." And that was the end of the conversation, because we learned from it, and it made us better, and we move forward. So we try not to waste a bunch of time on things that are going to hold us back as a business. So that's kind of like, that's what I try to spend my time on.
I asked Josh this too, but what do you feel like your biggest challenge is that I need to overcome this or be better or focus more on this to solve?
That's a great question. There are things, I guess I would look at it maybe from the standpoint of like what is in our control versus what isn't in our control. There are a lot of things in business right now that are not in our control, so we just have to make sure we're as disciplined around those things as we can be, so that whatever the outcome is going to be, it's going to be the best possible outcome. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, it's, and I think for all business leaders, and it doesn't matter if your business is a small business with just a couple people or whether you have thousands of people in a business, it's kind of each morning or the beginning of each week thinking, what is the most impactful thing I can contribute? And then not getting distracted from that. Like having that true north where at the end of each day, maybe before you go to bed, which happens to be my routine, I look back over the day and I sort of like challenge myself to think, was there some part of the day I could have managed better around what the priorities needed to be? Did I get pulled off into something? Did a meeting go too long? Whatever the case may have been, and then try to do that more effectively the next day. Incremental progress.
That's awesome. I'm going to turn it out to let other people ask questions too. Does anybody have any questions from the crowd? Yeah.
You said you're opening a facility in Atlanta.
Yep.
Is that going to be a warehouse or just a production facility?
It's so that I was told to repeat the question when somebody asked a question. So the question was, is the facility in Alabama going to be a warehouse or production? So it's all cutting.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've seen our videos online of the big cutting facility in LA, or if you've happened to have been there, it basically is a mirror image of that facility. So it gives us the ability to continue to grow. When we built the building in Los Angeles, we built that facility, we thought it would carry us through 2024. And it's out of capacity by the end of the first quarter of next year, so only a couple months from now. So Alabama has to come online fast in order for us to be able to keep up with growth.
We cut there, assembled somewhere else.
That's right. Yep, so we'll still die in California. We'll send the dyed components to either LA or Alabama. They'll be cut in Alabama, and then in Alabama, they'll just jump on the boat to the port of Cortez in Honduras to go into all the sewing factories. Yeah. Yep. Sure.
You were saying before that you guys got so busy that you forgot to hire a CFO. What's your advice for just like managing growth as you're like in the middle of it, you're kind of in the throes of it? How do you manage growth as it's going through it?
That's a great question. So the question was, how do you manage growth? And I tell that story because it's like one of these traps we all can fall into as like either a business owner or a leader where you take things on in the business. And at first it's like a little thing, and then it's a bigger thing, and then that's all you end up doing is that thing that might not even add much value to the business. It's like busy work. It has to be done, but it's not really important for the business's growth. And that was the mistake. The mistake was just letting it kind of be something that a few people kind of did and kept track of. And I was involved in finance. One of our co-founders was involved in finance. And before you knew it, we're spending like half of our weeks on finance things and preparing for meetings and things to review. And so I think it's actually the biggest thing is having a really good sense of where you add value to drive growth in your business. And when you think about where time gets spent, if you're not spending time on that, look at what other things you are spending time on and hire great people to take that stuff and just do it. Because I actually think the biggest limiting factor for every one of us, whether you're more of a kind of a traditional business leader or whether you're an entrepreneur, is getting consumed with things that aren't going to let the business grow. And so it's just a matter of having that trigger. And I mean, it's wonderful. Once you get a great person to do that stuff, I mean, it's like the greatest feeling ever because you get all that time back. So I think that's the trickiest part of the whole thing. And it's, and not to belabor the point, but like sometimes it feels like a bit of a badge of honor. Like you're doing all this work, you're grinding, it's taking 12, 13 hours a day, and you're like, well, that's what an entrepreneur does, or that's what a leader does. And it's cool if you do that and it's growing the business or it's adding positive value. But if it's just sort of holding the ship together, there are lots of great people who can hold the ship together and give you the ability to do other things. Sure.
On the manufacturing and you guys building out this facility, what's the point of fabric coming in, I guess, from another country, getting dyed in California, freighted to Alabama, cut, sent all the way to Honduras to get sewn just to come right back to where it started? Like, what's the reasoning behind that? Why not just do it all stateside or overseas, right?
Yeah. I know it's a terrific question, and there are a lot of elements of it. So the question was, what's the point of bringing fabric, to the United States, dyeing it here, cutting it here, and then sending it to Central America, sewing it, and then bringing it back? So one of the big issues is that Bella Canvas only uses long staple cotton. In order to create the quality that we want in our spec, we can only use long staple cotton. There's very little long staple cotton grown in the United States, so we can't get it here. India, which is the largest, cotton country in the world, most of the crop there is long staple. So we historically have procured raw material from India. So we get it there, but the problem is the dye houses. Dyeing is like the worst part of the process in making apparel for the environment, and environmental responsibility is a big part of our ethos as a company. And when you look at how it's done in the rest of the world, like they use these treatment ponds where there's bacteria eating the dye, and like in Honduras and Nicaragua last year, There were hurricanes, and so those ponds get flooded, and then it goes into the environment. It's really bad. We dye everything in California because California has the highest wastewater standards in the world, hands down. And so we bring the fabric, we dye it in the most environmentally responsible place, but then it's like, well, we've added that much value in the US. Can we create American jobs and add more value here? And so that's why we cut here. We cut here because it adds American jobs, but we use automation to keep it competitive so that we can keep our prices where they need to be. We would sew here if there were enough sewers here, but there aren't. And that's the challenge. So that would be substantially more expensive, and there just aren't enough people anymore because the industry is left. And so we sew as close to here as we can to keep that trip as short as possible, keep the carbon footprint as small as possible. And so it's kind of like, it's a supply chain of necessities, along the way, but the parts that we can control in the US, we try to control in the US. Yeah, good question though. Sure.
To piggyback off that, you guys have the eco-friendly tea, right? Is there any future plans to push that goal to have a more sustainable carbon option?
There are. So we've tested a lot of different fibers that would, like polyester, for example. There are a lot of things we could do with recycled polyesters. There are polyester fibers now that require a lot less oil in the production process. And we sort of have two challenges in that. One is we believe in it. The other is we have to make sure that it's scalable at a really massive level. And so we have 4 or 5 sort of eco projects that are underway in the business to make it as sustainable as possible. And then as a company overall, we're always going to have parts of the process that unfortunately have unintended environmental consequences, like having 400 containers moving around the world. There's a carbon, impact. But right now we're in the process of evaluating, we're way down the road of building what would be the largest privately funded solar farm on the face of the planet in Central America. And so we're looking at funding and building a 100 megawatt solar farm that would basically, the green energy would offset basically our entire energy consumption as a company. So it's like you have a negative consequence, but you try to make up for it on the positive side and offset it by positive things that you can do. And so we're in the midst of working through that with the Nicaraguan government at the moment to get it to work out, because they don't have clean energy there. It's really dirty energy. But that's one of the biggest things that we're working on. But yes, we're always trying to find a better way.
Thank you. This is amazing.
Of course, thank you.
This is Chris Blakeslee, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good man. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.